Farming. About 80% of this country was centered around agriculture. The South more than the North. The South had very little industry. They were heavy into farming. Now most farms back or down south were not these huge plantations you see in movies. Most of them were small dirt farms. Just a few acres, enough to feed your family, and maybe enough to sell for a slight profit so you can get through the year. You stand up, please. Okay, you're a farmer. I walk up to you, hand you this. Now you're a farmer. Load it. Fire it like a soldier. Can you do it? As a farmer? You can? As a farmer? What does a farmer know about war? Absolutely nothing. Thank you. Now if I would walk up to you and say, if I write a companies to the rear in the column, would you know what I just said? It's a foreign language, isn't it? That is a foreign language to you. Before the war started, there was about 19,000 professional soldiers. That was the Marine Corps, the Navy, and the Army all combined. That's not many. By war's end, over 3 million men would fight. Now, with the exception of what you did this morning, if I were to line you up, and we start marching, and I start barking out orders, are you going to be able to follow any of them? Not a chance. Farmers just don't know anything about war. And there's no reason for you to know about war, is there? Your main goal is what as a farmer? To farm. Who cares about war? War breaks out, you have all just volunteered. For whatever reason, you have volunteered. Now it's the corporal's job and my job to teach you how to be soldiers. And it's not going to be easy. Not because you're not willing, but because you're all individuals. We have to knock that out of you. You have to be one unit. Think as one, act as one. Wisconsin men were almost impossible to train because they were too individual. They were stubborn, very stubborn. But they were excellent fighters. Now, typical day. Now as farmers, the beginning isn't going to bother you at all. You're going to get up around 5 o'clock. Now most farmers are probably going to get up a lot earlier than that. You get up at 5 o'clock. You, as Union, have an advantage over the Confederates right off the bat. You will have someone cooking your meals for you. You won't have to worry about that. Confederates weren't so lucky. They usually had to make their own. So you eat, you clean up, get everything squared away, and then guess what? Now as volunteers, guess what you get to do for the next 3 to 4 hours in the morning? You know, you're not going to sleep. You will want to sleep. Practice. You're going to drill. That little bit you did this morning is nothing compared to what you're going to do for the next 3 to 4 hours. Now, lunchtime. Again, someone's going to make your meal for you. It's going to be ready for you. You get a chance to clean up. You get a chance to eat. Guess what you get to do in the afternoon? Drill again. You're going to drill some more. Dinner rolls around. Again, Union. Someone's got your meal ready for you. Clean up. What are you going to do in the evening? No, drill some more. You're drilling. Now, you will drill 6 to 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Why not 7? Sunday. Very good. Because it's the Lord's Day, it's the Sabbath. Back then, religion was extremely important to them. The South more so than the North. The South had a lot fewer denominations. There were just a few churches. In the North, you had many. But still, you have Sunday off to go to church and worship. Now, a lot of times your company officers or even your commanding generals will lead that. Stonewall Jackson was well known for holding prayer services. Now, there is a piece of equipment that's going to become your best friend. The corporal's going to talk about that.
Okay. The whole time you're drilling, 9 times out of 10, you're lugging around one of these. Here, see how heavy this is. This rifle weighs about 9 pounds. Here. Go ahead.
Go ahead and pass it around.
All day. You learn the manual alarms with that, stack it, how to load it, fire it. This is a 3-band musket, rifled musket, meaning it has rifling in it. It shoots a bullet like this. These are actual Civil War bullets. It's called a mini ball. Okay, the tactics back then were still fighting like Napoleonic era with smooth bore muskets that just fired a big round ball like this, but small. So these guns shot farther and faster, and they hit with a lot more power. When these bullets would hit somebody, it would shatter an arm, a hand, a leg, whatever. But it hit you, it caused a lot of damage. That's why they all cut off the arms and the legs and stuff in the Civil War. Now, basically this gun is nothing but a big cap gun, really. There's not a whole lot to it. There are 10 steps. 10 steps to loading and firing this musket.
This would sit on top.
I'm skipping a few steps. Right now, this bullet, this rifle's got, in real life, would have a mini ball and powder in it. And it'll be rammed down with my ramrod right here. Technically, this rifle's only half loaded. If you hold it upside down, nothing will happen to it. It's a powder rifle. It's pretty harmless, actually. Held it upside down.
While you're drilling, like he said, you're going to be drilling with this, your main responsibility for this is to keep it clean, extremely clean.
What he's doing over there is trying to do 3 shots a minute. Is that what he's doing? All right. He's got double loads. And see all that smoke that came out of the musket? Just a little bit? Now during a battle you had thousands and thousands of soldiers. And then you had a cannon shooter and smoke from that. So what do you think would happen out in the battlefield? You can't see anything. Right. You can't hear anything. Because most of the time you're half deaf from all the guns going off and people yelling. So the soldiers, most of them being new, I got one in my pocket. Okay. They'd get excited and wouldn't know what they're doing, and they keep loading in the rifle, thinking they fired it. And they found rifles on the battlefields with mini balls all the way up the barrel. And then obviously you can't shoot anymore, so they just get rid of it. Or it would blow up. Now, the other part of the rifle is this little thing here. Have you had bayonet practice yet over there? No. Okay. Okay. What do you think this shiny little thing is for? Yeah, that was the idea. Yeah, right? Digging, right? Right, right.
Main thing, that's what it was for.
Remember I always said the fighting was basically patterned after the Napoleonic War? Well, back then you had one shot with your musket, and then they went bayonet to bayonet. Well, in this war, they still gave it to us, but we didn't really need them. Plus, you're fighting Americans against Americans. They thought it was kind of barbaric and cruel to use them against each other. So they used it for a tool. Pretty much people didn't use them at all, except for as a tool. But why do you think they kept giving them to us? And you have an idea why they kept giving these things to us? Ringo. Because the end of the rifle, it looks.
It's like you can kill someone.
We had to do our facey movements and everything holding the bayonet. Now, the funny thing with holding the bayonet out, it adds more weight to the front of the rifle. It actually pulls the rifle down even further when you're hanging onto it. Makes it even heavier. And the only other reason they used to keep it is because, see how it's shiny? You used to have to shine them up. And then it looks really intimidating walking down the road because the sun would hit it and you're glowing. It'd catch all the brass buttons and everything else be all shiny in your rifle and your uniform, and it would just glow. It'd be very intimidating. Shortly after the Civil War, they got rid of the bayonet. Already?
Now, second sergeant, on down near the pond. Don't look wet. Okay? Might slide down this way also. Just don't look wet. Move down when you need this direction. Give yourself enough elbow distance here. Okay? All right. Our dear Sergeant General McClellan has given us orders to learn the use of the bayonet. So we have what they call a bayonet exercise. Now, the position starts called the guard position. What you will do, the position you're at right now, you're going to step slightly forward with your left foot. You will take your right foot, point the toe in the right direction. Okay? Very well. Now, give yourself enough balance so that you have an athletic stance. What I mean is you have balance. Bend your knees a little bit, move a little bit side to side. Balance. Okay? Maintain this footwork. Now, next thing you do with your musket, you go like this. Off your right hip, point it up like this. Okay? This is called the guard position.
Now, from this position, we will either advance you or retreat you. To advance, you simply step forward with your left foot first and follow with your right. Just the left, right. Okay? That's an advance. Okay? Retreat, the opposite way. You start with the right, go back with the left. Okay? Maintain your footwork and your stance throughout. Okay? Try it. Advance. Left, right. Advance. Left, right. Advance. Left, right. Retreat. Right, left. Retreat. Right, left. Retreat. Right, left. Retreat. Right, left. All right. Now, since the bayonet is an attacking weapon, we need to learn how to attack with it. From the guard position, you'll get two commands. First command is thrust. You simply straighten the musket out towards your enemy. Thrust. Develop. You'll step forward with your left foot straight to your right knee. This is develop. The next command is guard. Return to your starting position. Okay? Let's try it. Thrust. Develop. Guard. Again. Thrust. Develop. Guard. Again. Thrust. Develop. Guard. Now, there's another advance where we can combine all these into one, called the facade. What I want you to do is from this position, watch first. You're going to right foot over left foot down, thrust and develop, all in one motion. Okay? Facade. It goes right, left, thrust, develop. Guard. Okay? Called facade. Try that. Facade. Right foot, left foot, thrust, develop. Guard. Okay? Try it again. Facade. Right foot, left foot, thrust, develop. Guard. Very nicely done. Okay? Maintain your position. Now, we've got 4 directional assaults, or 4 areas that we can attack the enemy. Okay? The first one is called in prime, which is your lower right. Next one is called in second, which is your lower left. Next one is in tierce, upper left. Last one is in court, upper right. Okay? I give you a command, point your musket in that direction. In prime. In second. In tier. In court. In prime. In second. In tier. In court. Guard. Okay? 4 positions. Now, from each one of those positions, we can thrust and develop. So let's go with in prime, thrust, develop, guard. In second, thrust, develop, guard. In tierce, thrust, develop, guard. In court, thrust, develop, guard. Wonderful. Okay? Now, listen to my commands. I'll move you, either retreat you, advance you, I'll give you an area of attack, and a thrust and develop. Okay? Remember, in prime and second and tierce and fourth. Okay? Guard! Retreat! 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 In prime! Thrust! Develop! Guard! In second! Thrust! Develop! Guard! Advance! 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 In tierce! Thrust! Develop! Guard! In court! Thrust! Develop! Guard! Wonderful. Good group. 69th New York Irish people really well. Okay, now, Since we're not going to be fighting mere dummies standing there waiting for us to put a bayonet, we have to be able to defend ourselves as well. That's called a parry. Okay? Remember your 4 directions. We're going to defend ourselves with each 4. So if I go in prime, parry, you're simply going to take the back of your musket, or the bottom side of your musket, slide it over to the right. Okay? This is in prime, parry. See you do that. Okay? Guard. Okay, we're going to go in second, parry, lead with the barrel. Okay, in second, parry, guard. In tierce, parry. Guard. In quartz, parry. Guard. Listen to the command. Retreat. In prime, parry. Guard. Retreat. In second, parry. Guard. Retreat. In tierce, parry. Guard. Retreat. In quarter, parry. Guard. Wonderful. Okay. I want the front rank to about face. Face the rear rank. March towards the rear rank. Rear rank with the shoulder arm. March. Shoulder arm. About face, face me. Face me. Listen up. Sergeant. Make sure your people stay in line. Sergeant. Stay in line. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do this. I'm going to have you go in guard. Give you the command forward march. You're going to march at the in guard. I say halt. I'm going to give you a command. One of the directions, thrust and develop. Do that. Sergeants, make sure you're lying. Everybody stay in line. When you march forward, I want to hear huzzah. Huzzah! 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 All right. Here we go. Front three. Guard! Guard. Forward, march! Huzzah! 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 Oh, halt! In prime! Thrust! Develop! Guard! All right. First sergeant, left your muscle up against the tree. Rear rank. Guard! Hang five. Move them up, move back, move back. Okay. Forward. March. Huzzah! 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 Halt! In second. Thrust. Up. Guard. All right, second sergeant. Sergeant, we are done. Get warmed up.
Sergeant.
Mrs. Youngie, where are we going?
Confederate camp number 7.
And 85 to 90% of them were of Irish descent as well. So the 69th New York and the 10th Tennessee had strong bonds, just depending on where you immigrated. So, quite honestly, they actually had some correspondence going on between them. When we were imprisoned in Camp Douglas, where modern-day Chicago O'Hare Airport is located, they wanted us. They told us, hey, if you guys want to come and fight on our side, you can join the 69th New York. There was an open invitation to the 10th Tennessee to do so, and they didn't. So that's an ironic part of history. Okay, when you guys, some of you were in the 69th New York and captured and POW'd down in Andersonville, there was an attempt for you to join the 10th Tennessee. There was approximately 5 people from the 69th New York that took that offer up. Okay, and there's substantial evidence to that effect. But the 69th New York, I applaud you. You were first generation Americans. All of your parents from the 69th New York, and some of you were born in Ireland, okay? And you left Ireland because of the heavy iron arm of Britain. So it's sort of ironic that you were on the New York side fighting to maintain a union, where your parents or yourselves, if you were younger, you would have wanted to break free from the tyranny of a company, of a country. So it's just sort of ironic. I'm portraying a Confederate soldier from the 10th Tennessee, an Irish brigade, Irish Army, and we are going campaign style. If you notice, I don't have a lot with me, do I? Very little bit. But everything that I have here, I carried on my back. I didn't make numerous trips in. I didn't wait for a wagon to drop anything off. I didn't wait for a railroad car to drop things off. I carried this. I marched with this. I marched 15 to 30 miles a day with this on my body, on my back, and on my person. 15 miles, if you don't know, is approximately from here down to Fleet Farm. Okay? Then you get a drink of water and you turn around and go back. That's the 30-mile trip that you would march on an average day for soldiers. Some soldiers were well known to march over 45 or 65 miles a day. It all depended on where the battle was. But campaign style meant that we were going into war, or we were leaving in defeat into a battle. Okay? So campaign, you left the wagon trains back and protected, and we would march into war or into battle before that. If you notice, I'm a little bit differently dressed than you are. I'm not as uniform as you guys. Most of you guys have kepis on, and most of you have a uniform type of look to you. In our Confederate forces, especially in the western part of the Confederacy, we dress similar to what I'm wearing. Okay? We all came from all different backgrounds, came from all different economic levels, but pretty much we tried to be uniform as well. Alrighty? I wore wool uniforms in winter, spring, summer, or fall. I didn't have a summer uniform and I didn't have a winter uniform. I had one uniform. And it was made of wool, and it was long sleeve. Wool would make your skin itchy. So many times you'd wear the cotton shirt underneath. But a cotton shirt, once wet with perspiration or wetness, would stick to you. You'd feel clammy. You know, most of you have a cotton shirt on today, and I bet you if you get sweaty and stuff, you'd feel pretty clammy against you. Wool lets your skin breathe. So wool is a good material, and yet it's a scratchy material. Okay? Who wouldn't like to wear it every single day? It's long sleeve. Much like my hat, I have a wide-brimmed hat, and it's a civilian hat. It's not an Army issue hat. It would come from, you know, when I mustered into service probably, or I'd buy it from a sutler that was selling it when I was at war. Wide-brimmed, much in the same way that hat is. Wide-brimmed so that you keep the elements away from my face, my ears, top of my ears, the back of my neck. You know, I wouldn't want to have a red neck, would I? I wouldn't want to be called a redneck. I wouldn't want my ears burned. I wouldn't want my nose burned. So and with my nose, I have to have an especially wide brim. Okay. So anyway, I'd wear a hat, and it would become my identity. Much in the same way that when you wear a baseball cap all summer, people would recognize you. In the same way in an army, your cap is your identity. It became your identity. If you wore it cocked a certain way or slouched a certain way, this is called a slouch hat, it would become your identity. And so when you get a new hat, people wouldn't recognize you because they would look at your hat, not necessarily your face. Not necessarily your face. So that's about the hat. And they came from all different. And this is a felt hat, so felt is semi-water resistant. So I could go down into the river, grab a hatful, and I can make it up here, and I could pour it into my pot, or I could do something else with it, or feed the horse, or wash my face in it or something, or just throw it over me to cool me off. So it was a pretty elemental hat. This one has a leather strap to it, a leather thong. Girls don't, or guys don't get too worried about the word. But it's you know, in time of battle, I would put it around my ears so I wouldn't lose it, because the hat was my identity. Okay, you know, when cowboys and westerns, you know, you'd always see that with that, but that's pretty much, they wouldn't want to lose their hat in a time of battle. Okay, and if I'm skedaddling away from war, I certainly wouldn't want to lose my hat. Okay. My jacket is called a shell jacket. They come in all shapes and sizes and colors. If you notice, I have a pair of suspenders on. A pair of suspenders can be leather or cotton or linen, but they held my pants up. They didn't have belts and loops in those days. That was not the cultural style of the day. The zipper was not invented yet, so on the fly they only had buttons. Okay, and the buttons could be pewter or bone or porcelain or copper. Okay, they didn't, or brass. So all sorts of buttons, but everything was usually buttoned or strapped. Okay, they didn't have the hooks yet, or they didn't have the safety pin yet, wasn't invented, and they certainly didn't have the zipper. That wasn't invented until 40 years later or so. Long sleeve shirts, everything was always covered. Your body was covered as much as possible. You wanted to keep your white skin lily white. You certainly didn't want to have color to it. Because if you had color to your skin, you would equate yourself with what? Being black, or being of a lower class, or a poorer class. Okay? So that was just a traditional thing. And also, it would keep you from getting scratched or hurt or bit, okay, if you wore long sleeve. And it protected you. And you, again, you'd wear long sleeve all summer long in the hottest summer. Wool pants, but boys and gals, there was no briefs or boxers in those days. You'd all be wearing long underwear. Girls, you'd be wearing the pantaloons. Have you been over to that station yet and talked about the hoop skirts and all that? Okay, you may get over there and have an opportunity to talk about that, but the girls would wear pantaloons, okay, and you'd wear about, I don't know, 40 layers of stuff, you know, it seemed like, I don't know. But anyway, that was just general. You'd wear hoop skirts with whalebone and all that kind of stuff, okay? So that was just the style of those days. If you notice, I took my jacket off, but normally you never would in a company of females, guys. You'd always be bloused, okay? That's what it was called. You always want to blouse yourself. You would never, you could have it like this, but you'd always try to be the gentleman and portray yourself. Especially in the Army, they would demand that of you. If you notice, I have a pair of boots on, a pair of brogans, leather with wooden soles. And because those are wooden soles, if we'd be marching back 30 miles every day, those wooden soles would wear out, wouldn't they? Through tree roots and cobblestone and everything else. So on my heel, we attached a heel plate. Looks much like a horseshoe, if you notice. Okay? That would keep my shoe from wearing out. Now later in the mid to late war, they would make a uniform shoe. A uniform shoe would be just one style shoe. You wouldn't have your left and right. Like all of you have left and right shoes, and if you put them on wrong, they laugh at you when you're 3 years old, 4 years old, and you know kids would laugh at you because you had your shoes on the wrong feet. Well, they would make a uniform shoe, so if one side of your shoe would wear out, you could just flip them around, put them on your other foot, and they would wear twice as long. Okay, that was a trick that they made, especially in the Confederate forces, because they just did not have the factories to make shoe wear. Alrighty? This uniform would last the duration of the war. Very rarely would you be able to get a well, in fact, this is a Midwestern war, like in 1862, 1863. By 1865, I maybe would have be dressed in this, but it would certainly look a lot different. The homespun would be all wore out. I'd have holes. It'd be different. It'd have sewings in it and everything else. It would take its toll. Okay, if you think about it, wearing the same jeans every day for 4 years. Okay, every day, your body, your perspiration and everything else would just wear out. You would just wear your clothes out. But that's what they had to do. They just didn't have it. $15 a month. $15 a month in pay would not get you very far, okay, to buy something new. And you'd probably try to get boots before you get something else, right? If you notice, on my back, I'd be carrying haversacks filled with food. And this is a rainproof one. This is brushed with tar so that it became waterproof. If it wasn't waterproof, it would look similar to this. They were called haversacks. We call them backpacks today, but it'd be a haversack. You carry everything in there. Okay? In those, you would carry utensils, something like a bowl, something like this. This is actually a half of a canteen, by the way. See? That's where the nozzle would be. And for your enjoyment, you guys all ate hardtack today, didn't you? Well, this piece of hardtack, it just broke a couple years ago. This is 17 years old. 17 years old. I've had it for 17 years. This is one of the first hardtack I ever made. But it's not even moldy. If I would soak it in water, believe it or not, or coffee or something, I could probably chew it. Because there's accounts of when the Civil War broke out, they had warehouses of this stuff from the War of 1845, the Mexican War with Mexico. That was 15 years earlier. Well, they pulled out the warehouses full of that stuff and fed it to the armies. That's the honest to God truth. They had boll weevils in it, and little worms, and everything else. Soldiers would write home complaining about it. There's letters all over the country stating to that effect. But hardtack was pretty good. It's like a pretzel, really. It's water, salt, and flour. That's all it is. Same like a pretzel. That's all a pretzel is. Okay? But this is hardtack, like I said. All right? Along with that, you would maybe want to carry a housewife with you. And you're like, what, a housewife? Well, a housewife was a sewing kit. That's what they were called. And in there you would have needles, buttons, anything else that you could carry to mend your uniform, because men got pretty good at stitching together their uniforms, okay? They got pretty good. In fact, I've done it on the campaign. I've actually helped guys out stitching their uniform back together if their crotch rips out, something like that. You wouldn't want to, quite honestly, you wouldn't want an airy crotch, I'll tell you that. Okay, I know it's sort of goofy and sort of, but you just have, that's part of war. You guys are old enough to understand it. All right. Blanket roll, very, very important to have. Okay, blanket roll. Some of them would have backpacks, but this is a blanket roll. I can carry an extra pair of underwear, long underwear. I can pair another shirt, a pair of socks. I can carry letters from home, letters from my wife, or letters from my sweetheart, or letters from both, I guess, or you finally got it. All the other groups didn't get it. I don't know, they didn't get it. They didn't even laugh. Thanks, guys, for doing it. But anyway, you can carry a lot in here. And when I was in 1994, when I went down to Louisiana and I did a 7-day march, 85 miles, all we did was carry this. And we had our daily rations with us. We moved for 7 days, so I know what it's like. That's why this little badge is here. I marched for 7 days. There's only 300 of us, all the reenactors in the United States. There's 300 of us, less than 300 of us, that have this badge. This is called our badge of honor. 7 days. We all put a 7 on it, stitched in there, because we were the ones that survived it. The Confederates survived. The Yankees gave up. Because it was harsh. It was 85 miles. Okay? So it's sort of our badge. Any questions that you guys have? Any questions? Yeah. They said, on the march, do I get any food? Yes, they would. They would try to do a daily or like maybe once or twice a week ration. You would partner up with 4 people in your company, and you would split rations between the 4 of you. Normally, that's what would happen. Okay, and you would maybe get a side of or some bacon or something, and you would all wrap that up in brown paper or whatever you had. You try to maintain that the salt pork that was salted down so that you could have some sustenance. You would forage together. But you would try to, they try to get wagon trains up to you about every 3 or 4 days, okay? But yeah, you couldn't carry a week's worth of food marching. So they tried to have wagon trains that would come up there for you. But that was a hard thing. Usually wagon trains would be anywhere from 2 to 5 miles away. So in other words, if we needed to meet the wagon train, we'd have to march all the way over to the high school quick to get our daily rations. Okay, they would always try to keep an echelon of trains back. Another question. I'm waiting for the booms. No, I didn't sneak along Almond Joys along the march. No. Almonds, maybe. I had almonds down there. Any other questions? All right, a couple of things that you may not know about that I want to inform you of. The Enfield rifle was a single shot. Every time you shoot it, you'd have to reload it. It weighed about 10 pounds, and you carried that everywhere you went. It was made in England. It was not made in the United States. This is a foreign-made rifle. That was one of the things. That was a stickler point with the Federals, with you guys, the 69th New York, and all of your Federal soldiers and the Confederate soldiers, because England would sell these to the Confederacy. Yes. No, I've shot some live round with it, and it doesn't have a lot of kick. It doesn't have any more than like a shotgun would. If you've ever shot a shotgun, it doesn't have any more kick than that. But these were fairly accurate because they were rifled. The earlier Enfields weren't. They were rifled. In other words, it has these little swirls in there, the little marks down the barrel. If it didn't, it could go all over. This was pretty accurate to about 150 yards. After that, it was anybody's guess. 150 yards is 1.5 football fields. After that, it was anybody's guess. I couldn't get very accurate at all. About 75 yards, I could hit the mark. So about half that for me. I just wasn't very good at it. Okay, and then I haven't shot it in a number of years. I just saw Mr. Herrick put his ears up, and
Off by the wayside. But like I said, it was a paid position. On a good month, I could rake in about $10. My husband was a corporal or a father or brother, and they were raking in 13. We could live in high up the hawk on $23 a month. All I had to do was basically bank it because I got all my rations from the Army. I got my food, I got my medical assistance, I got all my wares, or all my props, or whatever, from the Army itself, so I really didn't have to spend any money. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about clothing first. 24/7, day and night, I would be first wearing what they call a chemise. You probably would know it more of a slip or a nightgown. And what do you think would be the first thing I would put on when I get out of bed in the morning? Nope, I already have my chemise on because I slept in it.
Gloves?
Nope. My socks and shoes. I didn't want my feet to get cold, and I didn't want my feet to get dirty. So my socks and shoes were always at the edge of my bed. When you have a lot of months that are cold, you wanted to make sure that you had your socks and shoes on. Everything else that I put on, I could pretty much basically put on around my socks and shoes. It wasn't a big deal. After my socks and shoes, I would get up and I would get my long underwear. It was proper at the time to not show any type of skin other than my hands or from the neck up. I was not allowed to show my ankles or anything like that. It was also fashion of the time that I'd be very light skinned. My hands and my face, I wanted to shelter from the sun. And a lot of people who didn't have the money for servants, like to work in the field and do their own housework, they got tanned very frequently. So what they started doing was they started putting arsenic on their face and on their hands. Does anybody know what that is?
Like a poison.
What?
It's a poison.
Yes, it's a poison. Whoever said it. They used it back in the early 1900s for bugs on potatoes when they were growing potatoes. So to this day, our grandpa will still peel the potato skins off his potatoes because he thinks there's pesticides on it. Anyway, so what they would do is they'd spread arsenic on their face and on their hands and would bleach out their skin because they wanted to be fashionable too, even though they still had to do their own work. Now, after I put on my long underwear and my socks and shoes, I would put on my corset. Do you have a volunteer? childbirth. Can you tie your shoes?
No.
What a lot of women did, the ones that were very fashion conscious, was that they would wear this 24/7, so they would sleep in it. And that would really rearrange your insides. Your lungs, instead of being able to take deep breaths and breathe, your lungs became elongated. And that's why back then, when you see it on the movies, they're like, oh, I'm going to faint and all this stuff, it's because they couldn't get enough oxygen to their brains because their lungs couldn't expand. They had the corset on too tight. Other things are in there too, your intestines, your stomach, your kidneys, all that stuff was getting compressed against each other. A lot of women who were very fashion conscious and were upper society, if they were pregnant at not the right time, they would also wear the corset. There were a lot of miscarriages and a lot of birth defects because they had their corset on when they were pregnant, because they wanted to hide that they were pregnant. If I was working at home, I would be wearing what we're wearing, more of a work dress, something that doesn't have a hoop under it. My corset would be a little bit more free-flowing. It would be stuffed with straw instead of boning, just so I had more range of motion when I was working around the fire or doing housework. But after I would put on my corset, I would put on my petticoat. And I was still fashion conscious in the house, so I still wore 5 to 10 petticoats underneath my dress so I could have the broad hips. I still had the work stay is what was called, corset and the work stay. I would have my work stay on and I would still have about 5 to 10 petticoats on. But believe you me, when it's 80 and 90 degrees outside and you got 5 to 10 petticoats on, it is not great. It is hot. So then they came up with the hoop. The hoop skirt goes under a better dress, a day dress, something you would go to church in, something you would go to church social in, maybe you're going into town, maybe you're going to a friend's to have tea. But you would wear your hoop under there, and that would eliminate all the petticoats except for one. You still had to wear your modesty slip. You couldn't show anything. And the hoop is actually really cool because when you walk, it sways, and it invites the breeze to cool you down. And on 90-degree days, that's really nice when you're walking when it's hot. Another thing that the hoop did was on your day dress, you had a lot of ruffles or beadwork or lacing or anything like that. If you were a really good seamstress, you wanted to promote that you were a really good seamstress. So when you sat down, the hoop skirt would kind of display everything, all your handiwork, as you were sitting at the church social. It became a conversation piece. Let's see, another thing was that they always wanted to make their clothing last as long as possible. They didn't have a Walmart or a mall or anything like that to go and get replacements if it was ripped or torn. They always had to replace it by getting fabric and making it themselves. Now, on a dress like we have, they would very often sew an extra 4 inches of fabric inside the waistband, because the thing that would wear out the most would be my hem. And what they would use homespun fabric, so it's the same on both sides, and you would cut off the bottom, detach it at the waist, flip it around, and you had a new skirt at the bottom. That's another reason why we're wearing it. We want to protect the fit of our dress. And once the apron got soiled or burnt or whatever, because you can burn yourself when you're at the fire, even when you don't have a hoop on, this would just be thrown out because it would be rags anyway. But this part you can still keep as a handkerchief, you can keep it as a piece to a quilt, you can keep it as a rag, whatever you would need to use it for. So you always reuse your fabric. Now, I said that the fashion of the time was to be light-skinned, and of course, any type of class citizen would want to be in fashion. So when I was working out in the field, I would wear what's called a slat bonnet. And a slat bonnet, I thought I was going to get that. A slat bonnet actually has little slats of wood in it. I think this one's cardboard because it's really flimsy, but it should have little slats of wood in there to keep your brim very rigid. Because when I'm working out in the field, I want to cover everything I can. I cover the back of my neck. I cover the sides of my face. The only thing I can see is what I'm working on in front of me. What do you think could happen to you because people did wear this in town? This is the only bonnet they have. What do you think might happen to you if you wear this in town? Yeah, you can run into people. Okay. Actually, things would run into you. Towns are very noisy. There's kids, dogs, people, wagons. You can't hear anything. Women would walk across the street with a bonnet on, didn't see what was coming at them. They could be run over by a wagon. A horse could be coming down the street. You don't know. So a lot of women were actually killed with slat bonnets on. Yep, go Now, if you're wearing a day dress, you would wear a fancier bonnet with lace or flowers or ribbons or whatever, and you notice it's cut a little short at the back. It's because the hairstyle was a low bun at the back of your neck, your bonnet sat on top of the bun, and you tied it underneath your chin. Some people portray that there were hats with hat pins on the time, when they stick a pin in their hair and you through the hair and the hat stays on. That was actually in the late 1870s. That was not during the Civil War. Civil War style was the bonnet with big ribbons. A big hoop ribbon was the fashion piece off your bonnet, apparently. When you're also wearing a day dress, because your bonnet doesn't cover much of your face, you always have a parasol with you to shield your face from the sun. It was not for rain. And you also have a pair of gloves to cover up your hands. Your face and your hands are the first thing to tan when you're standing outside for long periods of time. Now, little kids, up until the age of about 4, girls and boys would wear a dress. Anybody tell me why girls and boys would be wearing a dress? Easier to change the diaper, yes, that's one of the reasons. It's actually harder to crawl in a dress, so the faster they learned to walk, the better it was for mom, because as soon as they started walking, they were pitched outside to the older siblings, and mom could be left alone in her house doing her housework. So, the older siblings could be the babysitters instead of the parents. Also, if they were outside with the older siblings, less of a chance of the baby crawling into the fire. So you wanted to get them outside as soon as possible. If I had a friend and she had a baby and she's walking down the street, how could I tell if it was a girl or a boy if they both had a dress on?
Ask.
Something about the hair. No. Does a couple of you want to take your hats off for a second? You would be a girl.
There was a flower.
I think you'd be a girl.
Ponytail.
You'd be a boy.
Curly hair.
Nope. It's where your part is in your hair. Girls are parted down the middle, boys are parted down the side. Anyway, any questions on clothing? Okay, Lisa?
Some of us would be
Okay,
confusing.
I'll just basically go through the steps of laundry. Laundry took about 3 days to do. This is a typical setup for laundress here. It also covered 10 things that I set up today. You explain about yes. So on the first day, we would do the mending first. Does anybody know why we would do mending first? Any guesses before we wash? Yes? Mending was always done first, so when we wash clothes, the hole or fray wouldn't get first. After we would do all our mending, here's the stuff, all the yarn. And the housewife would use needles and thread and stuff, things like that. After the mending, we would sort all of the clothing. After the clothing was sorted, we would soak them overnight. Okay? So, that was the first day. Does anybody want to volunteer? Wash some clothes? Okay? Bar soap. Sometimes come in powder form. I'm just using the bar. Okay? Set down in the water. Put the shirt in the water. It's going to be so good. Get it wet. Take the shirt and rub the soap into the shirt. Anywhere. And start scrubbing with your knuckles. Yep, use your knuckles. And stand up against the washboard so it doesn't move like that. Okay. How would you like to do this all day and rub your knuckles raw?
Sounds fun.
You'd rather do the... Oh, this is how they did it. Yep. Keep going. Keep rubbing. Use your knuckles. Wash it good. So anyway, while she's washing, usually laundresses love rainwater. If we could get rainwater, it was just... Well, this we got from down there. Pretty gross, huh, to do laundry in? But if that's all we could get, that's what we would get. So after the washing, we'd rinse the clothes a couple of times. Shirt in there. Amanda's probably not getting that clean, but at least it's better than nothing. Yep, in there. Switch it around in there. Okay. Now, does anybody know why we rinse the clothes a couple times? Any guesses? Yep, so who said soap? To get the soap out? Yep, we'd have to get the soap out because, okay, there's another rinse bucket that we can transfer right here. This bucket, this is called bluing. It's like bleaching, okay? So you want to make sure you get all the soap out of the clothes because if you put the... If you would have any soap in that shirt, when you put it into the bleaching, it would turn your shirt yellow. That's what happens to the soap. Okay? And when you're done bleaching, this is a copper boiler. This is boiling water in it. Why would we put the... No, it's really not hot. Okay, then it goes in boiling water for what? What reason? Anybody know? If you have soldiers' clothing, maybe they have lice or... Thank you. Yep, or if they were sick, you want to boil the clothes and try and get that out. Now, after each load of laundry or so, we would change the water. So we would have to dump all this out, reboil the water. After we get it from the river, if we have rainwater, obviously, if we don't have rainwater, obviously we're not going to do laundry if we don't have a river or street to get water from. But otherwise, we had to fill up all the buckets again and start all over. So that took quite some time to boil all this water. After you boil it, then you dry it. This is how we dried it. Either hang it in a rope, or you could just do this. Okay? Now, leave out the sun to dry. That was also a way you could bleach your clothes because the sun would actually bleach your clothing. If you leave it out in the sun, it fades it. If you put colored clothing out, it's bleaching it. White clothes, no problem. So after overnight, clothes are dry or all day long, then what? After the clothes are dried, what do you do next? Nope. You iron. Okay? So when the clothes are dry, you just sprinkle them, get them wet a little bit. Here's the iron. Normally laundresses would have a couple of irons on the fire, so when one got cool, you could put this one back on the fire and go get another one. It's quite heavy, and they get pretty hot when you have them on the fire. So laundresses frequently got burned by those irons if they weren't careful and went to get medical attention for that. Now after you do the ironing, what you do after that is you fold them up and you send them back to be redistributed to the soldiers, and they get their clothes back probably from a captain or a higher rank because we were not allowed to do any business with the soldiers, okay? Getting our pay or otherwise.